Hi, podcast listeners. Welcome to the A World of Difference podcast. We have so many guests on this show making a difference in our lives, making a difference all around the world with the expertise that they bring. And yet so many of you are reaching out to me saying, you want more. It's not enough just what we're putting on these podcast episodes for you. And so I am here to extend a very warm welcome to you to our Difference Maker community, where you can join for as little as $5 a month to get all this extra content. Out the gate, you're going to get 30 plus minisodes of exclusive content not available for the regular podcast listeners, and an exclusive minisode every month. And you'll get exclusive voting power to help us pick podcast topics and more. And that's at our Changers tier. There's 3 different main tiers and then an extra larger tier. But whatever tier that you join at, you will be included in this extra content. And I know that many of you are wanting to go a little bit deeper. And so even though it gets a little wild in there sometimes because of how deep we go, I want you to join us there. This extra content is very special. It means a great deal to me to be a part of this community with you. And I would love to just exchange ideas or perspectives that you have around these different episodes. And that's the place where we do it. So please show up to our Difference Maker community. Give us $5 out of your pocket every month. And I think that you'll have a lot of fun in there because we do. And I would love for you to join us. So go to patreon.com/A World of Difference to join us there. Welcome to the A World of Difference podcast. I'm Lori Adams Brown, and this is a podcast for those who are different and want to make a difference. Hello, everyone. I hope you've been having a great Earth Day week celebration. And I know there are many events going on all around the world to celebrate our wonderful, beautiful planet and to care for her well. And that means all living beings that reside here and live together and coexist. So today we have a wonderful human being, Katherine McCord, who's going to be on the show and has all types of different ways that she lives her human life in ways that are just beautiful. Katherine is a physically and neurodiverse woman herself and talks about neurodiversity both in the United States and around the world. And her career has been built on inclusive innovation in people operations and HR tech. She lives by the motto that different is not a deficit. And she's going to talk today about her own journey with neurodiversity, which includes, well, she'll give us a definition of that first of all, but it includes OCD, and she also lives with bipolar. And she's going to describe for us what her journey has been like, how inclusion is important both in the workplace, but just in life with people we care about and love, and also speak directly to any of you out there who do struggle with bipolar. She's going to talk about her own experience and how we can support people with bipolar. She's also married to a man who is on the autism spectrum, and she's going to talk about all the parts of him that she loves and why often we have these biases and stereotypes and boxes that we put people in that aren't always helpful. But a lot of things that we would label as different or a disability sometimes get mislabeled, or a disorder or an illness can often have sides of it that we don't consider. And she's going to talk a little bit about that as well today, because here at the World of Difference podcast, we are all about understanding our differences, becoming aware of them, accepting them, and also knowing how to live together in ways that help each other flourish in this world. And so in Autism Awareness, and also we also like to call it Autism Acceptance Month, which is a preferred term in our family, we want to understand a little bit more about how we can be helpful. And isn't that what Earth Day and being human on this planet together can really be all about when we celebrate those differences and listen to one another? So I'm so happy to introduce to you today the one, the only, the just outstanding human being, Katherine McCord. Hello, Katherine, and welcome to the A World of Difference podcast today on Earth Day. How are you?
I am fantastic. And that's such a cool day to get to be your guest. Thank you.
It is a cool day to get to be your guest. We love the world. We love this planet. We are so grateful for all of the human beings and every living creature that lives on this planet. And today we get a chance to celebrate all of that diversity in its various forms. I'm just curious, do you do anything special around Earth Day? Have you done that in the past? What do you like about Earth Day? Any of that is on the table.
Oh, I love, and I don't always get to do it on Earth Day, but sometime right around Earth Day, I always go over to the beach. I do live in South Florida. I go over to the beach and I just sit, and it's very early in the morning. I like to watch the sun come up. I usually see some shooting stars when I do this, and I just sit and breathe. And then I take my dog over to one of the nature preserves, and we just hang out with the trees and the plants and listen to all the sounds and have a grand old time together. That's how I celebrate.
Oh, I want to celebrate like that. I need
Well,
to
come
make a
to
trip to
Florida.
South Florida, and my dog just passed away, unfortunately, in February, but we're starting to foster soon. So maybe I'll
Oh,
be
that's a
showing up in
beautiful
South
process.
Florida. Yeah, yeah, it is. There's a rescue here in California that we've signed up to be foster family for until we're ready to adopt again, because our little one that passed away was a rescue from Singapore from when we lived there. So we're still grieving
Good
her,
for you.
little
Oh,
Coco.
yeah. And I'm sorry to
But when
hear
we're ready
that.
to open our home, yeah, no, it's tough. And, you know, it's, although it's normal and part of life, it's still really, really hard to deal with that kind of grief. And she was a part of our family. And that unconditional love that dogs can bring you when you walk through all of life's traumas. We were with her way more during COVID than we had been before with kids in online school for a year and a half. So,
Oh, yeah.
she yeah, she was a part of us and always will be in so many ways. But yeah, Earth Day is very special in
It
our
is.
family, has been for years. And we lived in Sumatra. My one who's now in college was, I think, 3 or 4 when we started a tradition of planting a tree on Earth Day. And then when we moved to Singapore, you weren't allowed to do that, which we thought was strange. But it's because they're the garden city and they plant all their own. They do a great job on their own, and it's kind of like, we don't want you just planting
Yeah, they're
anywhere.
like, don't mess it
Like
up.
we want to, yeah,
We have a very
exactly.
particular aesthetic. You'll just mess it up. Let us do it. Thank you.
Yes, totally. Absolutely right. Yes, absolutely. Well, another thing we're really in this month, and our family has really become aware many, many years ago, because I have one of my favorite family members is on the autism spectrum, is autistic. And that sent me years ago on a journey of understanding more about what it's like to be a human being on the autism spectrum. And it's not only helped me be a better human being to just understand and accept and embrace this, but also it's allowed me into the lives of many people who are neurodiverse. And so I know that you also identify in this way. And I would love for you just to share with our audience what neurodiversity is and what your personal journey has looked like a little bit with it.
Sure. So neurodiversity, first of all, is a widely encompassing terminology. So it was originally coined by a woman with autism in Australia, who is a sociologist named Judy Singer. But now the term has since evolved to mean any medically visible or diagnosable difference in how the brain processes information and stimuli. So this can be anything from a traumatic brain injury to something like ADHD, autism, even into the mental health areas such as bipolar and so on and so forth. Even my seizure disorder falls under that because it changes how I, under neurodiversity, because it changes how I process information. So
Wow.
that's what neurodiversity is. And one of the biggest concepts, so this is where Judy Singer really kind of set everything in motion, was that her idea was that different is not a deficit. And she's correct in that. They've actually since had a lot of cool scientific exploration down that field. Harvard has done some cool studies. Actually, Hewlett Packard did a really cool program around neurodiversity inclusion and cultivation of talent, and found out that those teams were 33% more productive than, than their counterpart teams.
Wow.
They actually have done some studies to show that autism is part of the reason that humans have evolved positively over the years. POL genetics and a few other sources. Oh gosh, I can't remember the other one right now, but it was a really cool study. That studied that. So the idea is that just because you're different does not mean that you're less than, and there are actually a lot of positive aspects that come with neurodiversity. And oh, my journey, right? You asked me that. So I love autism so much that I married it. My
It happens.
My my husband is on the spectrum, and actually a lot of the things that do endear him to me, it turns out are part of that part of his brain. And it's fascinating. It really is. And one thing that I like to remind people of during autism awareness is that be very careful because there are still a lot of these groups out here that support awareness like it's something to be sad about. It's like, oh, come raise
Hmm.
money because these poor people, they're so pathetic. Be very careful because that is not accurate. There are some people who have disability that go along with their autism, but autism is not inherently a disability. In fact, it can be something of a superpower. Um, just look at, I mean, all the people out there that have autism that are highly, highly accomplished. As for me personally, I have multiple neurodiversities. The two that I discuss the most are obsessive compulsive disorder, which was discovered in me as an early child. And then also, I do have bipolar, which is a lot of fun and, and can actually be a superpower. So people tend to go like, oh, it's a mental illness. I'm like, yeah, it's a mental health diagnosis. Be careful calling it an illness because if you see me when I'm manic, I look like Superwoman. So
Yeah.
just kind of be careful. And but the manic stages also have their dangers with them. It's just
Hmm.
a matter of learning to balance. So that's a little bit about
Yeah.
my journey.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate your vulnerability. And I know that people all around the world listening are learning so much already just from what you're saying. We have people in our podcast community that are also would consider themselves neurodiverse of all the, even every single thing that you mentioned. And inclusion has been difficult in some countries, some cultures, some workspaces, and educational spaces more than others. And so I personally try really hard to be inclusive, but I think part of that process means sitting and deeply listening to people who have all these differences. That's what our podcast is about. So help us
100%.
understand, yeah, help us understand how inclusion is important and what you, especially when it comes to neurodiversity and the things that you just mentioned, would say to us who want to be more inclusive in this community.
Just to give a little background before I answer your question, that's a beautiful question, by the way, so thank you. Is I have been doing work around inclusion and neurodiversity for oh gosh, years now. I don't even know how many. And
Yeah.
I do speak and teach both nationally and internationally on these topics. Um, it's something that is very near and dear to me. And I do own a company that does a lot of work around inclusion. We do inclusion consulting as well as HR and so on and so forth. So that's what I do for a living. So when I think about this, it's not just the professional element, though, it's the personal. And a lot of people think that I got into it because of my journey, but that's not it at all. I saw a lot of pain in what I was doing caused unnecessarily, and usually, to be fair, very unintentionally by
Right.
other people. You know, they're not trying to be jerks often. You know, it just accidentally works out that way. One of the most detrimental things that I found over the years that people can require is masking. And masking simply means that you're asking somebody to behave in a way that's not normal to them, but is normal to you. And
Mm,
people are really bad about that. Things like requiring eye contact,
yeah.
requiring physical touch, requiring camera on, getting upset if somebody wants to do stemming, which if you've ever seen a person, doing things like this, maybe rocking, things like that. There's
Hmm.
all different types of stemming. Stemming can be auditory, humming to themselves, that kind of thing. Um, Also, using fidget toys, sitting on bounce balls instead of chairs. These things are are ways that people make themselves more comfortable, and it actually helps them focus and become more productive, including not looking at you. We
Yeah.
have this weird thing about looking at somebody as a way to show that you're listening. Well, for some people, yes, but if you get somebody who is in the neurodiverse community, they may listen better if they're not looking at you directly.
Right.
So it's a lot of realizing that your normal is not other people's normal and just coming to understand that. So there's one thing because there's so many different things that people can need from all the different diversities, right? Whether it's people with physical diversity, neurodiversity, cultural diversity, socioeconomic diversity, so on and so forth. There's one thing that will always work for you, and that is to break your ego defense and respond with curiosity. So the
Mm.
ego defense is natural. That's a natural thing that your brain does, that where it needs to be right. So when it hears something that makes it feel like it's wrong, it throws up defenses as to why it's right. But that doesn't actually help us in today's society. That's an old need. It's something that we need as children. It is not something that we need as we progress, especially when it comes to our interactions with other humans. So when somebody tells you, this is what I need, and it's contrary to what you're doing, or even if they say, I need you to stop that, instead of responding with ego, take a deep breath and respond and say, tell me more about that.
Mm.
And it will work wonders for you. Whether you're in leadership, whether this is your friend, whether it's your partner, it will make such a difference. So that's my number one sort of rule or tip for inclusion is break the ego defense and respond with curiosity and come to the understanding that your normal is not that of everyone else on the planet.
Such a good tip. Honestly, judgment to me, the opposite of it is curiosity. And curiosity leads to knowledge. And who doesn't want knowledge, right?
Right.
And knowledge can be used to help change the world. But if we apply empathy toward other human beings along with the knowledge, there's just like so much we can accomplish together. Honestly, this is a great tip for me as a mom with teenagers, just to take a deep breath and then be like, oh, tell me more about that,
You
honey.
are not the first mom to say that to me. Like, wait a minute, this is a good mom. You were actually the third mom in a period of about 5 weeks to say that to me.
Yes, raising Gen Z is no joke. I'm just saying they're awesome, but wow, we need to
So
take a
educated
moment
though, and it's
sometimes.
like, ah,
Yeah. They come out with some things you're like, okay, right, okay.
yeah,
I'm just
that's
gonna be
fun.
curious. Stay curious. Yeah,
Yeah, stay
exactly.
curious. That's what
But
it
yes,
is. And never
yep,
be afraid to, like, you're gonna mess up. I still mess up.
yeah,
I'll do or
yeah,
say
yeah,
something and I'll have somebody message me and go, "Hey, just so you know, this would be better." I'm like, "Okay, cool." And thank you. And
yeah.
if I have further questions, I ask them and I adjust as best I can. The hardest one for me is stopping the use of the term guys to refer to everyone, because that's like
Me
a lot
too.
of people don't care for that anymore, but that's so hard for me. And I try and I catch it when I do it. I correct it in the moment, but
Right.
it still comes out of my mouth sometimes. It
Yeah, no, I
does.
struggle with that too. I have to work, and it's just English. It's such a like. There's I speak several languages, and it's not an issue in other languages that I speak, right? Because there's just anyway, some languages don't,
That's not what
especially
people
Asian
say.
languages, don't have gender.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
associated. Anyway, it's just like why? Um, so, but yes, we're all working on something. That's a saying we've had in our family since our kids were little, and whether you have a diagnosis or you don't, I mean, mommy's working on this. There's no label for it, but I'm really working hard on this, and it's a lot of hard work, and I need your support. And I know you're working
Yeah.
on this, and we're trying to help you. And but we're all working on stuff, right? So let's jump into a little bit about because you've worked in HR and in tech for a while, and then that can be a specific type of environment. And we have a lot of people listening. I live in Silicon Valley. We have a lot of people here that work in tech, several that work in HR, and they're interested not only in being more inclusive, but also there's been a lot of conversation around mental health in the workplace. And it's causing us to rethink some of our systems and ways that we work in order to be bring our full selves, but also be understanding of the differences that we all bring. And like I said, if we're all working on something, how do we work in a workplace that accommodates all the different situations, especially mental health? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
That's a big topic.
Yeah.
It's but a great one. Mental health in the workplace, first of all, is really underrated. I have a wonderful friend from Finland. Her name is Ira, and she works with a company called Emergy, and they do a lot of work around emotional agency, which is learning how to use emotions appropriately in the workplace, both from a leadership standpoint and from the employee standpoint, all of that. And it's really brilliant, brilliant stuff, because one of the things that she talks about is if you don't understand how to use your emotions properly, you're never going to have good psychological safety or mental wellness in the workplace. So you need to know how to use them appropriately, how to communicate them as leaders, how to anticipate the emotions of your team. And that's a big part of it. And I think one of the most detrimental things we do right now in the workplace in terms of mental health is denying emotions, or this weird
Mm.
separation of personal and professional. Now, I agree with that you don't need to necessarily talk about your personal life all the time at work. From that standpoint, I
Yeah.
agree with that old idea. I think that that can actually go bad directions, but we do need to acknowledge that people can't leave what's happening to them at the doorstep. They can't. We saw a
Yeah.
lot of that in 2020. That actually kind of helps with that because there was just so
Hmm.
much that was just so big happening all across the whole wide world that it kind of made people stop and realize, oh right, yeah, we actually can't do that. That's not how we function. We are holistic beings. We there is no separating and segmenting things out. So um, I think it's understanding that people are whole and that you're going to have to work with them where they're at. It's a lot of psychological safety, which if you don't know what that, a lot of people hear that term and they don't really know what it means. It just means that you feel comfortable to question, to dissent, and to express opinion without
Mm.
fear of reprisal. That's all it is. It's a very simple concept. Um, I think a lot of people misconstrue that. I've had some very funny comments about that over time, but psychological safety is important. Your people need to feel comfortable expressing themselves. Again, not asking people to mask, because if you're asking people to work in a way that's not natural to them, they're going to malfunction. They're going to be less productive. They're going to be less healthy.
Hmm.
And then we need to understand that sometimes people are in so much pain that work is not possible. And we need to
Yeah.
work with that, not against it. So, for instance, years ago, and I do have permission to share this story, by the way, years ago, I was managing a team at an awful company, awful, terrible company. And I had a team leader who was wonderful and was like the biggest supporter of the team you could ever have, the rah rah guy. And one day I came in and everything he was saying was sharp and cross, and his energy was off, and it wasn't right. And he seemed
Yeah.
disorganized. So I called him into my office and I sat him down. I said, "Okay, tell me what's going on. What's up?"
Hmm.
And nothing could have prepared me for what he was about to say, but he looked at me and he literally physically sunk down into his chair. And he said, "My wife tried to kill herself last night."
Oh my gosh.
And I just stopped. And I didn't, it took me a second to respond. I wish I'd have had some immediate genius response, but I didn't. And we sat there and I said, "Okay." I said, I'm so sorry, but I've got to ask, why are you here?" That was the
Yeah.
first thing. And I
Yeah.
realized immediately how rude that sounded. I said, "Okay, I didn't mean that aggressively. I'm just curious. Why are you here?" And he said, "Well, when I changed positions, they didn't let my PTO carry over. So I don't have any PTO and we can't lose any money right now."
Oh my gosh.
And this was not the kind, and I did call HR to double check on the higher up in HR to double check on this, but I already knew the answer before I did. This company did not allow you to change over PTO, donate PTO, anything like that. They sucked. So they just did.
Mhm.
Sorry, it's just truth.
Yeah.
Um, and so I looked at him and I said, "Okay, you are working from home for the next few days. Take your laptop, respond to 2 or 3 emails a day so that it looks, I can prove that you were doing something, and go be with your wife.
Yeah.
Reach out to me in a few days and we can see where we're at."
Mm.
And when he came back, he was much better. He was energized because she was better. Things were on a better track. It
Hmm.
was it was better.
Hmm.
And it just it's one of those things. Sometimes you have to put the human first. And I think like with the mental health thing, that's what we forget. We focus on numbers and all this kind of thing, but sometimes you have to put the human first, and then ultimately it works out. I mean, if I'd have made him stay and work there, he'd have messed a whole bunch of things up. I guarantee you. He would have been slow as heck. He would have made everybody else miserable. Then they're slow, and then they're messing things up, and everybody's feisty and all that. And you might have a problem that arises that takes you weeks to squash.
Yeah.
Whereas he got a few days off. He came back and kicked butt. There you go. You know?
Yeah.
So just giving people the space to heal, listening to them, let them tell you what they need. those kinds of things. Sorry, that was a really long answer, but
Oh, please don't apologize. That was a powerful answer. And the reality is, life happens, right?
yeah,
We're human. And when we let ourselves be human, then we all have a space and place here together to be human. And that's what makes our world a better place, because pretending nothing affects us, that no act of God or disaster could come our way, or even mistake and situation we might cause and bring upon ourselves, like, humans do these things, right? And we're born in this body, and we live in this body for our days on this earth, and it's getting older, and things happen. Right? We
yeah.
have this
Unfortunately, I'm not
narrative.
aging in reverse. I'm not Benjamin Buttoning. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
it's rude,
No,
but it's
I think
happening.
yes, no, we just might as well face the reality. I mean, we have sort of this narrative sometimes, and especially I would say like white culture in the United States. I see this quite a bit, where it's like the whole pull yourself up by your bootstraps thing. And I know we're trying to get rid of that in some ways, but it's still
Yeah, what
very
is
much a
that, by
part.
the way? Like, where
I don't know where
I
it came from. I don't know.
I've done some like research into this, but I'm like, this is the silliest. How did this not immediately go away? Because it's
Yeah.
so silly. Everybody has harmonious relationships that help to elevate them to where they are.
Yeah.
Like,
Everyone.
what is that?
Yeah. I
I don't
know.
know.
And
I don't
who
know.
can be sick, or I mean, you just, even if you live alone, like, there's people that make the medicine, you buy the medicine. Like, I mean, you're, in order to get well, we need each other. We're social beings, right? And so
Yes.
the more we acknowledge that, the better. And I just think, I work in global leadership and development at a tech company, and we have many countries around the world that we work in. And so there's all these different cultures, but I don't feel that there's any culture that can't relate to when your wife has had a really hard night and wants to end her life, that you wouldn't be a complete mess, and how wonderful that
Yeah.
you got to offer space. And I feel like that if your company does that, it helps people want to stay with a company that sees them as a human and not a cog in a wheel, because no one does well in those situations. We are human after all. So that's a
Absolutely.
great story of human leadership, and and allowing people to be, show up with themselves, whoever they are.
I would have been more concerned about him if he wasn't upset about that.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
that would have set off a whole new series of alarms that would have been a whole new
absolutely.
direction. But
Yeah.
you have to embrace the humanity. And but the other side of that too is then we also, you're talking about inclusion and how to best, be a good human or a good boss or whatever to people with different diversities. So I also have more diagnoses than most 75-year-olds. I legit had, this is a true story. I had Aflac one time. I was getting their insurance one time, and they literally, their team called me and goes, "I'm sorry, Miss McCord, we don't have your age right." And I said, "Oh, okay." So I told them my birth date, and they go, "But wait a minute, do you have this, and this?" I said, "Yeah." They go, "Oh my gosh, we're so sorry. We just assumed that your age was wrong." And I thought that was so funny. I have always thought that was one of the most hilarious moments of my life. Um, and it's amazing to me because I have people go, "Oh, it's so great that you're successful in spite of all of your health conditions." I said, "In spite of? Do you think I just like take them off and put them in a little bag and set them over here?
Right.
Or do you think they're like attached to my back and I'm like constantly fighting them out? No, this is just part of me. This is just what it is." So no, I am successful with all of my diagnoses. I am
Mm.
successful with my neurodiversity. I am successful with my 5,000 million medical conditions. And it's actually part of what makes me successful for various and sundry reasons. And so one thing I always talk to people about too is don't project disability. Do not assume disability
Mm.
of somebody else. Disability is not a bad word. I
No.
have legal and medical disabilities. It's the social disability that'll kill you, though. That's what'll just
Mm.
squash you into nothing. And that is when society tells you you're disabled
Yeah.
against, whatever, evidence to the contrary. And so there's nothing wrong with medical disability. There's nothing wrong with legal disability, but don't push social disability onto someone that can devastate their life, not just this job, not just this situation, but it can really cause a problem for them.
Mm.
So that's one thing I always like to remind people of too is don't assume what somebody can or
Mhm.
cannot do. Trust me. I've had people
Yeah.
tell me, "Oh, people with autism are terrible leaders." I said, "Really?" Because the best manager I ever knew was on the spectrum. So
Yeah.
I don't know what you're talking about. Or they can't do sales, really, because I know somebody who has 6 sales awards that would beg to differ who's on the spectrum.
Yeah.
So, it's just,
There's so many boxes. Yeah.
yeah, I'm like,
Yeah.
don't assume and don't project your discomfort. One of the funniest examples I have of that is after years, almost a decade of fighting for a hysterectomy, I finally got it. And I had everybody go, "Oh, I'm so sorry." I'm like, "You're sorry that I'm healthier? That's very weird." They always kind of laugh and they're like, "Oh, no, I meant, because I said so because it made you sad. You assumed I was sad."
Mm,
And they
right.
go, "Oh." And I'm like, "Yeah." I said, "It's
Yeah.
okay. It's kind that you wanted to show empathy, but you don't need to. I'm okay."
You're like, I'm
So
fine.
be careful, just be kind of careful with that. I think, again, remembering the world doesn't revolve around us. There's other people in
Mhm.
it.
Oh, such a good lesson. That's just all by itself the mic drop of the interview, probably. But we will
Thank
have
you.
another few questions here. I do want to dig a little deeper into bipolar. And we do have a lot of stereotypes and bias around that in our workplaces, our educational spaces, and our societies. If someone knows and loves someone that has this particular diagnosis and they're either in the workspace with them or maybe it's a student that they teach, um, what are some of the ways that people can be more supportive of people who walk around every day living with bipolar? And you mentioned, manic might look really productive, but it also has its dangers. And then, how can we help our loved ones as they walk through this?
That is a beautiful question too. You ask really good questions. Good for you. And I do a lot of these things, so that's good.
Aw, thanks.
Um, so first I want to say that bipolar has many different manifestations and variations.
Mhm.
There is not just bipolar and that's the end of it. Um,
Yeah.
there are different degrees, there's different ways that people handle it, there's different ways that people choose to medicate, not medicate, use therapy, not therapy. There is no right or wrong answer. I want to be very clear. The only wrong answer is to ignore it.
Mm.
That's the bad. That's the one thing you cannot do. So, bipolar, the main social misunderstanding around bipolar is that people with bipolar are erratic, that they're all over the place. Absolutely not. So, they're like, "Oh, well, your moods just change constantly." No, they don't. There's also some I have very long ups, very long downs, and
Mm.
then lots of periods of calm. That's my type of bipolar. There are others where it's always up or down, so on and so
Okay.
forth. But it's not constant, like 1 minute to the next flipping of moods. That's not it. Another one that's very funny is that people confuse bipolar with dissociative identity disorder, formerly known as multiple personality disorder. And no, they are not the same. They are not at all the same. I have a whole other thing about that, but just to let you know, those are not the same thing. So with bipolar, you can have, and you can also, people tend to, not always, but tend to have one cycle that's more prevalent for them. So for me, that's my mania. I will be manic a lot stronger, so to speak, than I am depressive. I also handle my depressive cycles very well. They're not difficult for me at all. I learned some very cool techniques early on with a psychologist who was into helping me manage things in a natural and sort of organized way. My OCD
Mm.
helped with that.
Yeah.
And so that really made a difference. And then the manic cycles can be interesting because, yes, you can be hyper productive. It can almost feel, from what it's been described to me, I've actually not done this, but I've had multiple people tell me that it's equivalent to doing a really good, like, party drug. Like, you're just super happy and up and energetic, and life is so great, and you just have all this energy, and you have all these projects, and you're super motivated. But it can also lead to excessive spending. It can
Mm.
lead to detrimental behaviors like being promiscuous. It can lead, I mean, just it's different for every person. And this is why it's important to learn to manage it, because being bipolar is not an excuse for those things. It
Right.
doesn't make them acceptable. You just need to learn to manage your impulses, basically. So it kind of, what I would say, if you want to support somebody who is bipolar, number one, encourage them to find a way to successfully manage their condition, whatever that is, and do not push anything on them. For instance, this surprises a lot of people. I do not medicate, never have, and I rarely do. I do have a med that I started once my hormones started changing as I got older. I needed a pill for occasionally extra, what I call my extra manic episodes. That's what I call them. I just call them my extra episodes, um, that are just kind of over the top. So a couple of times a year I take a pill, but for the most part I don't medicate. But that is my choice. It also took me years to learn how to do that, and a lot of
Mm,
support. I was very privileged to have the support I did from my family, my friends, and my partner. So that is
mm,
my choice. That is not right for everybody. But
right.
don't push them, don't insist. Just let them know that you want them to manage their condition. And it is also always appropriate with anyone in your life, whether it's about mental health, anything else, to set boundaries. So, for instance, if you know someone who is bipolar and they sometimes do something that harms you
Hmm.
when they're in a particular cycle, or if they refuse to medicate and that causes problems, or get therapy and that causes problems, whatever it is, if it actually hurts you personally, you do have the right to set a boundary and make it about that behavior, not about the diagnosis. So you can, for instance, this is one I actually know of, not from me, but from someone that I know, and their partner had to look at them and say, when you when you're in this section and you don't do this, you hurt our children emotionally,
Mm,
and that does not work for
mm,
me. So I need you to fix
mm,
that. However you choose to do it. I'm not going to sit here and boss you and tell you how to do it, but you need to fix this happening. You cannot hurt my children anymore. And that's appropriate. That's an appropriate boundary to set. So, just like with anything else, set those boundaries. And also, if you're into it, like let's say you're just one of those super nerdy, like I love to organize people, you can really help your bipolar friend because not all of them have OCD. So you can sit there and help them learn to chart their behavior, help them learn how to predict their own behavior. Let them know what you notice. Hey, I noticed that when you do this, a couple of hours later, I notice that you're manic. Or when this
mm,
happens, I notice you start, I notice, that when you're in this cycle of your mania, then your depression's about to start. So what can we do to prep you for that? What can we do to,
mm,
help you in this next cycle and help you move through it appropriately? That's really very, very helpful. And then, of course, if there is ever any talk about suicide or self harm, immediately get them help, whether they want it or not. That's the one time I
yeah.
believe in forcing it. Um, just get them help, stay with them if you can. But also, I'm going to say the thing that is so hard to hear, but I've had to make this choice in my life. Sometimes you have to walk away because you are not
Mm,
responsible for someone else's wellness or even their life. And even as a parent, because I know a parent who had to make that realization come to light for them and their brain about their adult child, I'm not talking about an adolescent child, their adult
mm,
child, they had to say, I am not responsible for the choices that my child is making. And that's it.
yeah.
So sometimes I think it's important to tell people that it's okay if you say, for my safety, for the well being of my other children, whatever it is, I need to step away from this person no matter what. That's okay
Mm.
too.
It's tough stuff. It's
It
hard to
is.
do that. And I
It
hope
is.
whoever is listening around the world that's walking through this right now is able to hear that and find a good therapist to help walk through, especially if you're parenting an adult child. That's really tough. Especially if you're in another country from them and like you just worry and it's like so many things can happen. But yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I want to sort of end our time together on this podcast with just a chance for you to share maybe to somebody who's listening who does have a diagnosis of bipolar. We just now talked about how we can support those individuals, but I wonder if you'd kind of end here with just speaking directly to them, somebody who's suffering. Maybe they've been diagnosed and they know it, or maybe they suspect that they have it. What do you wish someone had told you maybe along the way?
You know, I think that it's not what I wish somebody would have told me, it's what somebody did tell me. And just remember that any diagnosis is no different than in any other part of your body or your being. It doesn't define you, it doesn't own you, it doesn't control you. It's no different than the finger on your hands. It's okay. You can learn to use it, right? And work it to your advantage. It may take time, it may be somewhat frustrating, but you can do it and it will be okay. And there are times that it's hard, but there are also times that you will thrive. And when you get to a certain point in your journey, you'll realize that most of the time you are thriving. And that is a beautiful point. So don't be afraid. You can find your tribe. There are millions upon millions of us out there. You can even look up Bipolar Comedy Club. Yes, there is a comedy club full of people that are bipolar.
That's
And
funny.
they're wonderful resources. Some of them are even therapists. You can reach and counselors. You can reach out to them. They're a wonderful source of support. There are many others as well. If you want recommendations, I'm happy to make them. But just find your tribe, your people that will talk to you about it, be honest with you about it, will tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly, and that will love and support you no matter what.
Ah, such a beautiful message. And I hope if you're out there and this is something that you're struggling with, that you will reach out to Katherine so she can point you toward more of these resources. Very helpful. We are going to continue the conversation later with our Patreon supporters and we'll continue talking there. So if you haven't joined our Patreon community, please hop into patreon.com/a world of difference. But I do want to leave Katherine with an opportunity for you to tell people where to find you so they can find out more about the work that you do and those resources we just mentioned.
Absolutely. So reach out to me on LinkedIn. I am Katherine McCord, and it's very simple to find me. I'm one of like two people with my spelling on LinkedIn, so it's in the U.S., so it's super easy. Also, K McCord, KMCCORD, speaking.com is my speaking website, and then also you can find me. My company's name is Titan Management. So, and we're the recruiting Titan Management. There's also one that does like construction or something, but we're the we're the recruiting and HR based Titan Management.
I love it. Thank you so much for the work that you do, for your speaking, just for being so vulnerable and sharing with us today. It's been lovely to have
My
this
pleasure.
conversation with you on Earth
Thank you.
Day and at Autism Awareness/Acceptance Month. What a great
Yes.
time to talk to you. Thanks, Katherine.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. Katherine is just a spectacular human being. I was so honored to have her on the show today to talk about what we typically don't have conversations about out loud. And so that's kind of one of the things here at A World of Difference that we want to do is not hide behind our differences, but openly discuss them and be vulnerable and understand each other. And I think that Katherine, just her way of being in the world allows her and all of us to show up fully who we are. And I just really appreciate her work and her life and her voice around this. I would love it to I would love it if you would end up finding her and the work that she's doing, reaching out to her in professional ways, but also even just the resources that she mentioned for bipolar and her journey with it and how she's found some of those resources to be helpful. So please reach out to her, follow her on LinkedIn. And yeah, I think that she has so much to teach us, and I'm really grateful for her and her work. So I also just want to say, whatever you're doing around the world and have been doing over the last week to celebrate Earth Day, to care for the earth, to just relish in the beauty of this earth, whether it's at night sitting looking at the stars. That's one of my children's preferred way because he's studying aerospace engineering, or it's enjoying a snorkeling day in the ocean, or it's doing something to help pick up trash in your area, plant a tree, go volunteer at an animal rescue, or just sit and watch a sunset or a sunrise, feel the wind on your skin. It's just a beautiful planet that we get to inhabit and care for. And so as you're around the world caring for our planet, I'd love to know what you're doing, how you're enjoying this place we all call home, and the various expressions of it wherever you are. So come into our Patreon community where we're going to dig a little bit deeper with Katherine on what it was like for her as a child. And she's going to tell us a little bit about understanding as a child that she was different and what that was like for her particular journey. So join us in there in the Patreon community as we go in with an exclusive interview with her about that. And then also on any of our socials, if you want to just let us know what you're doing for Earth Day, how you're appreciating the earth, or maybe a goal that you have for the next year on how to care for the earth or appreciate the earth better. I'd love to hear about it. And maybe you'll give us some ideas. Maybe we could exchange some ideas and learn how to do that differently in our little parts of the world, wherever we are. So once again, happy Earth Day to all of you. I hope you're learning lots in this Autism Awareness, Autism Acceptance Month. And we have some great episodes coming up for you on the podcast. We're going to be interviewing Zachary Wagner about his book, Non-Toxic Masculinity, Recovering Healthy Male Sexuality. We're going to have Sheila Gray Gregoire, who has a newly released book called She Deserves Better. She's done research around women and growing up in the evangelical church and some of the purity culture messages and how those panned out over time. As you may recall, we had her on the podcast a couple of years ago when her book, The Great Sex Rescue, was just releasing. But she's done a lot of more research since then, and her new book, She Deserves Better, will be coming out, and we'll be talking about that for Sexual Assault Awareness Month as well. So we have a lot of great people that are going to be on the show, and I'm super excited to introduce them to you if you've not heard of them before. So please join us for those episodes. And also, we had to reschedule, but I wanted to let you know that we're going to be having a particular emphasis on Earth Day that we had to delay, but Kyle Maillard Schaap has written a book for understanding more about how we can care for the planet and be more involved in that as people of faith. So he was going to be on in time for Earth Day, but because of our rescheduling, he'll be on in early May. So look forward to that as well. And in the meantime, thank you for listening. It means so much to me that you're here in this community. You're making my world a better place. You're making a difference in my life. And I know that you are just doing great things wherever you are. So please keep being yourself, showing up in all your differences and making a difference wherever you are. Bye. As we're finishing this episode, if you're thinking, I really wish I could learn more or go a little bit deeper, well, that's what our Difference Maker community is for. I would love to welcome you in to join the rest of us there. Once again, it's only $5 a month to join, the price of a latte at your local coffee shop. You can join at our Changers tier. Difference Makers is a community that really means so much to me. It's very special because each time I have a guest on the show, I record something outside of what we give to just the regular podcast audience, where we go a little bit deeper, and then I post those video episodes in this community and we can discuss them. But also at the very beginning tier, which is our Changers tier of this community, you'll get exclusive voting power and help pick podcast topics that give us, more of what we want from your perspective. You'll have access to exclusive 30 plus mini-sodes that aren't out there for the general public. And you'll get every month an exclusive monthly bonus mini-sode. At our Groundbreakers level, which is $10 a month, you can join and get all of that, but also priority access to submit questions to the podcast. And you'll get an additional 2 exclusive monthly bonus mini-sodes. And at our Trailblazers tier, which is $15 a month, the price of 3 lattes a month, you can get all of that, plus also 3 exclusive monthly bonus minisodes and a patron shout out. So I would love for you to join us at any of those tiers. It'll help you come into this community, be in the midst of all of us, other difference makers, and we'd love to hear your perspective. I certainly would. It's a place to engage more with me and the audience around what you like, what you're resonating with, and once again, go deeper with each of our guests. So please join us in this membership community. I would love to hear your perspective and love to share this extra content with you. So show up at patreon.com/a world of difference.